Hi everybody, my name is Brady and I'm a 19th century American historian and we are back with another React video. I hope you all enjoyed your holiday season. I know it can be fun, but it's also very stressful for a lot of us, so I hope you got through it all right and are ready to go into 2021 feeling holly and jolly and whatever you're supposed to feel around the New Year's under normal circumstances. So today we're going to be doing a react video. We have World War One, the Seminal Tragedy. It's part 2 of the extra history series of that name. I'm excited about this one. I really enjoyed part 1. It really set the stage very well. Also, if you want to watch any of my extra history stuff, I have a playlist on my channel, so you can check that out. Watch this or any other series I checked out from the beginning. This should be cool, though. We're getting into the real setup of World War One. I guess the first part set it up and told us the international relations and stuff like that. This one is going to be the actual kickoff of World War One, Franz Ferdinand, and like the story that I would know as somebody who doesn't know much about World War One, but has kind of an elementary understanding of how it started, and maybe could use a little bit more help. And hopefully, this video helps. Yeah, that's where we're gonna be. Franz Ferdinand should be fun. Let's get this video started.
Alright, the stage is set. Now let's put the players in their places. The curtain opens on the back of a rundown cafe in Belgrade. A young man comes in carrying a package and takes a seat at a table with a handful of other young men huddled around. They still to a hush as he opens the package. Inside is a single piece of paper, a newspaper clipping. The one who brought the package bends over to stare at the page.
I don't need to know too much about World War One to know that this is a meeting of the Black Hand. The assassin group that took out Franz Ferdinand. I remembered this so well because I'm a fan of the Elder Scrolls series. And they have a group of assassins, and they have like this elite group of assassins among them that they call the Black Hand. So that was an easier thing for me to remember even before I was into history as much as I am right now. So that's one of those things that kind of stuck with me. Yeah, I don't know much if they have like any deeper history beyond this particular assassination, but this is the assassination to end all assassinations.
One of the other young men slides a candle across the table so he can better see. Before him, circled in red, is a headline, and it reads, Archduke Franz Ferdinand to visit Sarajevo. Now we skip ahead a few weeks. We're outside a palace. A resplendently dressed man and woman are getting in an open-top car 100 years ago this year. He's dressed in bright, blazing blue. His chest is full of medals. On his head, a grand horsehair cap. She is wearing a flowing white dress and laughing. He helps her into the car. This is Franz Ferdinand, the Archduke of Austria, next in line for succession to the throne, accompanied by his wife Sophie. They've come to Sarajevo to watch military maneuvers, but really that's an excuse. It's their anniversary. They've come to get away from the stifling courts of Austria where the Archduke's marriage to Sophie will never be accepted due to her low birth. She was...
Oh, really? With this whole thing, I know that there's tension with Serbia. There's like a nationalistic uprising coming right now. Kind of anti-imperialist in a sense, as far as I understand. I'm very curious to how much Franz Ferdinand was really thinking about this. If this is just a vacation, if he thought, hey, we'll go here and maybe we can show them some goodwill or something of the sort. You guys have told me, I think I made a joke about Franz Ferdinand, and you guys came back at me and were like, he was actually a pretty good dude, it seemed. And I'm always skeptical about that with history because there's not a lot of good dudes in history. We can generally agree that the further you go into people's lives, the more you'll find kind of the ugly side of things. So when people tell me somebody's a good dude, I'm just like, right, yeah, he was a good dude, sure, all right. But maybe he was.
After all, only a where the Archduke's marriage to Sophie will never be accepted due to her low birth. She was, after all, only a countess. But things have been really tense in this part of the empire. The
What
Serbian
a
agitators have
disappointment.
been acting with increased boldness to demand a Serbia free and independent from Austrian rule. And this day, of all days, falls on the anniversary of one of the greatest battles in Serbian history, the Battle of Kosovo. It's one of the
Dude.
great rallying points of the Serbian people, a point of national pride. To Serbian nationalists, this is one of their proudest days. And to them, for the Archduke of Austria, the symbol of their oppression, the embodiment of foreign rule, to come here on that day was the greatest insult.
So I have the privilege of knowing how this is going to end. Nationalism is always, it always gets painted with a negative brush, and typically it has very ugly elements to it. But the anti-imperialist element of nationalism is something that I can't help but kind of sympathize with, because nobody really wants to be ruled by another power. I mean, maybe some people do, but that sounds insane to me. I'm an American. Uh, but yeah, there are elements of nationalism. I look at it and I'm like, okay, how can I get mad at you for not wanting another country to rule over you? Like, I totally get that part. That always ends up being coupled with a lot of the ugly, like sometimes xenophobic, just really hateful ideas that tend to come with nationalism as well. I don't know about this specific case, but I know this isn't going to work out very well for the rest of the world.
Now, perhaps the Archduke had chosen that day to show solidarity, to ease tensions, to make the people of Serbia understand that he cared about their traditions. Maybe he simply didn't know that the day had any special importance, and he was just there to get away. But whatever the reason, he was ill-informed.
The cynical side of me wants to say, like, oh, this ignorant, out of touch son of a... That's usually where I want to go. I hope I'm wrong, though.
Or on any other day, the events that are about to play out may not have happened. On any other day, this might have turned out simply to be your average parade, an event which wouldn't even go down as a historical footnote in a long and prosperous rule. But something had to happen on this day. It was too symbolic, too important, too grand of a story. And so the first domino is placed in the mad and improbable events of this 28th day of June 1914.
I like the domino thing here. I like that metaphor. I think that really works. Him being like the first domino to be knocked over. But I would emphasize that there are a lot of dominoes already set up, and perhaps there were alternate pathways. If we didn't have this, we probably would have found a way into World War One from the sound of it. It seems like everybody's ready for World War One, but in a sense, isn't ready for what it's actually going to be. But they're ready to fight. They're looking for a reason. This just happened to be the one. I always like to say, we're humans. We'll find a way in. I guess in these alternate history scenarios, when it comes to what if this didn't happen, would we have had this war? I usually like to lean on the side of we're humans, we'll find a way.
So here now, in the sleek black car, the royal couple begins to process down the streets of Sarajevo, flanked by 5 other cars filled with officials and guards. It's a parade. The streets are lined with onlookers. The route has been published. The world knows exactly where the Archduke is going to be. And those young men from that cafe in Belgrade are there in that crowd. They are nationalists. They're patriots. They're assassins and terrorists. They call themselves Young Serbia and are part of the much more ominously named Black Hand.
Okay, so they're like a subcategory of the Black Hand? That's interesting. Or those just like synonyms, basically.
And they are angry. Angry in the way that only young men can be. And when I say young, I mean that barely any of them had reached the age of 20. They had in them an anger born of ideals, or they had ideals to rationalize their anger. A boldness born of a cause, or a cause to justify the brash kind of risk-taking that truly borders madness. But however you view them, here they were, hidden in the crowd, intent on killing the Archduke.
Their youth being emphasized is very interesting. Sometimes youth is easier to indoctrinate. Sometimes youth ends up being more rebellious in examples that I've studied. recent examples of things that I'm just now getting into. I've been getting into Soviet history a little bit. There was an element of like an older generation that was familiar with serfdom and stuff like that, and them being skeptical of the new Soviet government or whatever. But then there's this younger generation that's a little bit more willing to accept these new Marxist ideas and stuff. And we talk about like maybe American history, like early American history. We have this older generation that is skeptical of like taxation and big government or whatever, but then we have this younger generation that actually fought in the war and saw the consequences of not having a strong government because they didn't have the resources they needed when they needed it. So yeah, the age is always important to emphasize. I think people tend to, when speaking about a country on the whole, they tend to lump groups together a little bit too much, but that is one of the many factors that can separate people's political identity. I think we're all pretty aware of that. We all have maybe an uncle or something that's a little bit, you don't want to talk to him about politics at the dinner table. We'll just say that.
One by one, the Archduke's car passes his would-be assassins. Nothing happens. No attempt on his life. 2 of his assassins ended up succumbing to fear and couldn't go through with the deed. One felt pity for his wife sitting in the car and just couldn't bring himself to pull the trigger. Another one had an equipment malfunction. And so, one by one, Ferdinand passed them, none the wiser, smiling and waving to the crowd. Smiling and waving in an open-top car so the world could better see. But at last, on the Commercia Bridge, an assassin finally steps forward and throws a bomb at the Archduke's car. Seconds before it lands, Ferdinand sees it and dives behind the door of the car as the bomb passes over him and bounces into the street behind. An explosion rips through the ground, mangling the car following them and leaving 20 people wounded and bleeding on the street. The assassin leaps over the side of the bridge to make his escape, but in the type of amateurish planning that would be comical if the circumstances weren't so grave, he fails to realize that the river below is only 4 inches deep, and he hurts his leg in the fall. In one last act of comic tragic bravado, the assassin swallows the cyanide pill he's been carrying, a final "you'll never take me alive" gesture, but alas, these young high school assassins had bought their suicide pills on the cheap, and this one was way past its shelf life.
Oh, jeez. I've never heard this side of the story. I've never really heard much about the assassins in themselves. I mean, I've heard that there was a failed attempt, but they end up getting him eventually. But that's actually freaking hilarious. You couldn't even kill yourself, right? Oh, man. It's tragic. It is very tragic. But that actually it's good to add layers of comedy to tragic situations because it's the one thing that makes history a little bit more endurable because it's just such a negative subject. You get to see all the failures of humanity. It's good to be able to laugh at it every once in a while.
So the young man just sits quietly vomiting into the river while the police stroll down to take him very much alive. The motorcade races back the way it came, sirens screaming, and the city begins to lock down. Another of the young men, a 19-year-old named Gavrilo Princip, watches the cars go by, heart sinking. So it's done, he thinks to himself. It's off. The Archduke is alive. The assassination's failed. He is pretty bummed out. His hopes to be immortalized in the halls of Serbian heroes are dashed. All his dreams of glory just shattered.
So he's the guy who actually gets him, right? I recognize the name. So there's a reason that they're emphasizing him. It's going to get to the point where, because the Archduke's going to end up turning around. Oh, God. So it is him, right? I'm not wrong. I'll find out, but I'm saying it now because what's the point of making a guess when you're too close to the answer? I need to make the guess now before I know the actual answer.
Overall, it's been a pretty lousy day. So he goes off to pout, thinking maybe a snack will make me feel better. This one young man's comfort snack may seem like a small thing, but it's on the small things that history often turns. Back at City Hall, the Archduke and the mayor are having words. The mayor proposes that the Archduke and Duchess should continue on their trip, but the Archduke thunders back something like, "Are you crazy? You'd have us visit museums while bombs explode on your streets?" And then, in a gesture of gallantry that you don't often see anymore, he proposes instead that they immediately visit the hospital where the wounded were taken after the attack. So they don't hide him in a bunker or spirit him out of the country with a small army of guards like we would do today. Instead, they all pile out to the motorcade and start off towards the hospital.
This is the thing that triggered you guys to tell me he was a pretty good dude, because I was looking at this with my cynical eye, just like, okay, but what's his angle? Is this a gesture of power? Is he trying to make a power play here? But maybe he was just sympathetic. Because I always think of these noble types, and I'm like, you heartless, noble bastard. Like, I never have any, like, knee-jerk positive things to say. They have to earn my praise. It's one of those things. I don't know. After seeing so many that are so incredibly out of touch, I have developed a bias, and I recognize that bias, and I try to actually work around it when I'm doing serious history work, and I guess not as much when I'm just watching videos for fun.
But nobody remembers to tell Franz Ferdinand's driver, and I should mention that this is the Archduke's personal chauffeur. This fellow came along with the Archduke for the trip, but he's Austrian through and through. This guy does not know his way around Sarajevo. And as they're making their way through the city, the Archduke's driver makes a wrong turn onto Franz Joseph Street, a street named for the Archduke's father. Meanwhile, our failed assassin, Gavrilo Princip, is sitting outside a deli, eating his consolation snack and starting to feel maybe a little better. And maybe this won't be his only chance, he thinks. Maybe someday he'll have another shot at greatness. I mean, it was a really bad day, but who knows? It could still turn out okay.
He's making this guy seem kind of sympathetic. It's okay. You didn't get to kill him today, but you'll get to kill him tomorrow.
To go into hiding for a while, but holy is that the Archduke? Yes, right there in front of him, in the same open-topped car, was the Archduke and his wife. The driver had taken a random wrong turn onto the street where Gavrilo Princip was having a sandwich, and their car had just stalled out trying to back up. 3 strides away. Gavrilo can hear the Archduke and his wife talking from the car. No words, just actions. He stands up, he pulls out his pistol, and he fires 2 shots that change the world. The Archduke looks over, barely noticing the gendarmes wrestling the young man by the car to the ground. His only sight is for his wife, lying quietly on the floor of the car. He reaches out with a hand weak and heavy. Something's wrong with his neck. He can't quite think straight. He sees her and he utters one last wish. Sophie, Sophie, don't die. Live for our children.
You know, I never really knew that. I knew his wife was in the car. I actually didn't know if she actually got hit too. You only ever focus. I say you, not you, but like in my classes, I only ever really learned about the Archduke himself. And honestly, the way a lot of my classes when I was taking stuff on World War One, that probably would have gone a little bit more back to high school. I've taken a class on World War One since, but it was a bit more specific and didn't really go into this particular part. But the focus was so impersonal. I guess I wasn't worried about the Archduke's feelings so much. So it's kind of good to get these little moments of humanity, and I like to see those even in people that I don't generally like. And honestly, the Archduke, he seems all right. I don't know what he was like as a human outside of this trip or anything. He had like a whole life outside of this, so I'm not going to make a full judgment on his character here. But it doesn't seem too bad.
A man leans over him and asks if he's badly hurt, and he thinks he says, "It's nothing. It's nothing." Oh, he repeats the phrase, each time a little more quietly, and neither of them live through the hour. And so our first act is done. A martyred prince and princess, or the death of oppressors. An act of terror or a heroic strike for freedom. An act that relied on 1,000 coincidences. On a poorly chosen date.
Sometimes that's how it be.
Plans, on a misinformed driver, and on a sad young man having a sandwich. But no matter how you look at it, it was an act that began the greatest war in history, and brought to an end the world that all of these actors knew. This war would change the world. Join us next time and find out how the world responds to this event.
Cool. I'm really excited for this one. This one, I think World War One is maybe more up my alley than I thought it would be. I mean, focusing on the military elements of anything has never really been my thing, but there's so many different angles to take it from, and this has been interesting so far. So we'll see. If there are any other extra history things you want me to check out when this series is done, I didn't check how many episodes of this is, but I'm going to do them a little more frequently than I used to do these because they have like 300 extra history things, and I want to eventually check out all of them. We'll see how long that ends up taking, but I want to do them a little bit more frequently. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know if there's any other history related videos or more or less anything else you want me to check out. Pop it in the comment section below. Join the Discord. It's in the description box below. You can get the invite link. Follow me on Twitter because I have that. I just like hiccuping now, so now that that's happening, I'm gonna call this video over. All right, thank you. Bye.